Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. So let's talk about some important stories happening around Iran and China last few days. So the first story is China sent out a warning message to the United States. Basically, what the United States has been doing is piracy. They have been blocking Iranian ships and Chinese ships as well. So there was one particular ship that was going from China to Iran, and the United States basically blew up a hole in the engine room, and they boarded the ship, and they've basically taken it. So obviously, China's not happy, Iran's not happy. So Iran has basically, after this incident, Iran has said that they are not going to send any delegations to negotiate with the United States. And I'm not sure if that's true or not, because I think they might still send someone, but I'm not sure. Um, and Iran has also kind of said that they're going to carry on with their blockade of the Hormuz Strait as well. So it's not helping anyone. It's not helping the negotiations as well. And the deadline is due to finish in maybe just over 24 hours, I believe. And China is definitely not happy about this. And China has been extremely annoyed, and they've sent a warning to the United States. And when China sends a warning to anyone, they should take it absolutely seriously, guys. If I remember, the last two times China sent a warning, the first time was before the Korean War, and the second time was during the Vietnam War. So before the Korean War, China sent a number of warnings to the United States, and they were all ignored by the United States at the time. I think President Truman was in power, if I can remember, and he was quoted as saying, "The Chinese sent us some warnings, but we decided not to act against those warnings because the Chinese provided no threat." So basically, they dismissed China. They thought China is no threat. So they thought it doesn't matter what if China sends a warning or not. What are they going to do, right? Well, guess what? China absolutely kicked ass in Korean War, and they killed a lot of American soldiers, equipment, and in fact, you know, it was such a loss for America that America left behind a lot of equipment from the Korean War. And China used that equipment to further their own military, because at the time China was very poor, and there was a big embargo from the world not selling China any weapons whatsoever. And during that Korean War, China killed a lot of American soldiers, caused a lot of heavy damage to the American reputation, and they lost a lot of equipment as well. A lot of this equipment was, basically taken over by the Chinese and the North Koreans, and they've used that over the years, and China's used that obviously over the years as well. And now, I mean, now look at China's military; it's head and shoulders above everyone else at the moment. They all started from the Korean War, and then China also sent a warning message to America regarding the Vietnam War as well. China asked, nicely a few times to America, you know, get out of Vietnam, you know, stop invading the country. You need to leave, otherwise we might get involved. And again, they ignored the Chinese, and guess what? The Chinese helped the North Vietnamese fight off the Americans. And the rest is history, guys. America lost loads of soldiers again, lost lots of money, lots of equipment, lost their reputation. And it wasn't until the Gulf War, in the first Gulf War with Saddam Hussein, that they got some of that reputation back. But For 20, 30 years, Americans basically had to eat humble pie because they lost that war in Vietnam. And they lost it because they didn't expect China to to join in. Obviously, China didn't officially join in. It was what you call a voluntary service, the same as in North Korea. Uh, it was a voluntary service. Whoever wanted to join in basically was allowed to join in and help. And this was not an official government thing. It was just basically a group of volunteer soldiers, and the rest is history, guys. Rest is and this is why you should take China's threats seriously. And the last two times the Americans didn't take China's threat seriously, they got really, really hammered big time. And it seems like America has a very short memory and very, very, this is the problem with America, the arrogance, and the short-term thinking, you know, you- it's almost like, like social media guys, they have a very, very short time span of attention span. So they'll be interested in something for 5 minutes, and then suddenly they want to move on to something else, and they want to move on to something else. They get bored very, very quickly, and they have a very short-term memory. They don't think longer than 5, 10 minutes. They're like the memory of a goldfish. So you can imagine Trump. Trump is not a politician. He's a businessman. He doesn't read history. He doesn't know anything about world history. He doesn't know anything about American history. He doesn't know anything about Chinese history. He doesn't. So he can't even think that far to the Korean War. He can't even think that far to the Vietnam War, and he can't even think the last time the Chinese gave the Americans a warning. He cannot think that far ahead. Same way, Trump has basically started this Iran war without even thinking. He didn't think that Iran would close the Hormuz Strait. He didn't think that Iran would hit all the Gulf bases, all the American bases in the Gulf. He didn't think Iran would put up such a great fight. He didn't think Iran had hypersonic missiles that can invade American radars. He didn't think that Iran could take out Israel with their hypersonic missiles. He didn't think that Iran can fire at their you know aircraft carriers. There's a lot of things that Trump doesn't really think about. Maybe he doesn't even listen to his intelligence reports. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard is supposed to be the head of intelligence, right? He doesn't even involve her in anything. And I bet all the intelligence he gets about Iran, he just ignores it because he thinks America is the best. You, they will overcome anything. It doesn't really matter what Iran has. Well, guess what? He's just made Iran a superpower. Alongside China, Russia, United States. Now, he's going to make Iran a superpower because of this war. Iran is now taking control of the Hormuz Strait, and they're going to make hundreds of billions per year just through the Hormuz Strait alone. And guess where that money is going to be going? It's going to be going to Iranian development. It's going to go to Iranian weapons. They're going to build a lot more underground bunkers and underground missile cities. They're going to, you know, they have shown that they can stand toe to toe with America and Israel. What other country can do that? There's only two other countries that can do that. That's, Russia and China that can fight America toe to toe and Israel. So they're going to be a superpower, whether you like it or not, by the end of this war. And they have basically given birth to a superpower. And Iran will definitely learn a lot from this war. And you're going to see, huge amounts of pride going into the Iranian people, and they're going to really fast track Iran's development. And the same thing happened with China, guys. I mean, there was a huge, everyone knows about the 100-year humiliation. However, after the Korean War, it gave the Chinese people a huge confidence that they can take on Americans and, fight a war with Americans. And at that time, China had no weapons whatsoever. they had to rely on Soviet handouts. And the Soviets weren't even giving that many weapons out anyway. And I believe in the Korean War, the Chinese soldiers were, most of them were fighting with bare fists because they had hardly any weapons from the Soviets, and they had hardly any guns, hardly any bullets. They had hardly any clothes, warm clothes to wear because it was really cold around the North Korean borders. So China was fighting against all odds at the time. They were really poor, and China was really hurt by civil wars, and they had huge issues with sanctions, and they had famine as well. There was huge issues at the time, and they still, were able to fight toe to toe with the Americans at the time. And the same thing Iran is doing now. They're fighting toe to toe with America, even though they've had 50 years worth of sanctions. 50 years of sanctions, guys. And, Iranian people have been hugely punished for 50 years. And and they're still able to give up a good fight with the Americans, and they've still kept their sovereignty. Keeping your sovereignty in this day and age is extremely difficult, guys. But yeah, good on Iran for that. And I think Trump is basically going to propel Iran to a superpower in the region. And I think together, Iran and Russia and China together as a triangle they're going to basically push for a multipolar world, and these three countries are going to be the anchor or the foundations to a new multipolar world. And there's going to be all sorts of trade going on between these three countries. There's going to be security guarantees provided by all three countries. And we're going to see a completely new world by the next century, I believe. And this is the start, and Trump has basically started all that. So going back to China, guys, I mean, Trump really needs to take Chinese basically threats and warnings seriously, because he doesn't want to make the same mistake previous presidents did by ignoring China's warnings and Chinese threats, basically, because they do not want to get involved in a war with China right now. I can tell you that right now. I mean, these these crazy Westerners who cannot even take on Iran, who's been under heavy sanctions for 50 years, suddenly think they can take on China. I mean, come on, what kind of world are they living in? What Iran has proved is American weapons are pretty much useless. All of the American bases all over the Middle East, all these years people were thinking no country will be stupid enough to attack an American base. No country would be silly enough. These American bases are heavily they've got heavy defenses, they've got Patriot missiles, THAAD missiles, and nobody would be daring enough to hit these American bases. Well, guess what? Iran has. And all these Gulf countries are absolutely shocked. They thought having American bases in their countries would provide them security. Well, guess what? They haven't bought them any security. They've bought them lots of trouble. They've bought them, Iranian missiles. And the whole world is going to, it's literally about to change right now. I think countries are realizing having an American base in your country is no, it's not an advantage. It's actually a disadvantage. However, the problem is a lot of these countries are run by puppets. So even though they see that these American bases are useless, even though America pretty much runs that particular vassal country or vassal state, and what this war has basically taught us is which countries are vassals of the United States. And people were I think people didn't really realize how much of puppets or vassals the Gulf countries were, the GCC countries. I mean, people had some sort of inkling they were puppets of the United States, but they didn't realize they were that much of a puppet. They didn't realize they were full on 100% vassal states. I mean, what other Muslim country would allow American bases, American airspace to attack another Muslim country? This was this would have been unheard of, 20, 30, 40 years ago, unheard of. No other Muslim country would allow Americans and Israel's, by the way, Israel, which who are hell bent on doing a greater Israel, taking half of Syria, half of Saudi Arabia, taking over all of the Middle East, including all the oil and energy sites. Basically, these Gulf countries are supporting that, supporting Israel against another Muslim country who's obviously fighting for survival and also fighting against Israel, against Israel's expansion. Iran is the last stronghold. Otherwise, if Iran is gone, then you can basically kiss goodbye to the Middle East because Iran and America would take over. Hezbollah would be quickly shut down if Iran is gone. They've already taken out Hamas pretty much. They've destroyed all of Gaza. And the rest of the Gulf countries would be easy. Israel would have an easy job taking over the rest of the Middle East. It will be greater Israel. Forget about half of Saudi Arabia. They'll probably take all of it. Absolutely crazy how these Gulf countries are puppets of Israel, literally. I don't think any Muslim expected that. I mean, there was a time when Saudi Arabian King Faisal, I believe, he stood up to the West and he stood up for Palestine. He did oil embargo at the time when Israel attacked its neighboring countries, and those days are gone, guys. Nowadays, you have just puppets running the show. Puppets running it. They're under the thumb of Israel and America. Yeah, so like I said, these countries who are sovereign, China, Russia, Iran, you can include North Korea into that as well. These are the only true sovereign states of the world who hasn't allowed, Israel and America to take over their society and take over their business, take over their wealth and natural resources. I mean, look at China, guys. China has not allowed America to steal money from China, steal its natural resources, steal its rare earths and oil, gold, you name it. A country has a lot of treasures and resources, natural resources. If you allow American companies and IMF and, you know, American businesses to take all these resources away from you, you are basically giving away your country, giving away your riches. So China has not allowed that. And look at China today. They've kept all their treasures, they've kept all their natural resources, and they've basically sold it and used that money for the people and for China's development. And that money has not been wasted and gone to American companies and American billionaires, oligarchs, all of oil barons, gone to um, bribes and things like that. I believe there was a story about this Chinese. I think I don't remember who he was, but they basically raided his house and they found 13.5 tons of gold hidden in his house. They raided it and they've basically put him under death sentence. So that's how serious they take to corruption. But 13.5 million is like a drop in the bucket for the Trump regime or the Epstein regime. These guys are making billions, absolute billions from insider trading. Just before President Trump sends out a tweet, he probably tells all his friends, tells his son, put this bet on, and I'm going to send this tweet and watch the markets go crazy. And that's what they've been doing for the past year or two. They've been making billions. 13.5 million is nothing compared to how much money Trump has been making insider trading, and his friends and his sons, and you can add Jared Kushner and other people. Absolutely crazy, guys. Absolutely crazy. So yeah, I don't think China would put boots on the ground, by the way. So let's just say Trump ignores China's warning. So will China declare war on America? I don't think so. I think what China would do is they will block the rare earths again. I think they will ban the rare earths from being sold to America. That's one thing they will do. And secondly, they will openly um, send weapons and munitions to Iran. They're not going to hide it. They're not going to, do it under secrecy. They'll do it openly, basically in front of Americans' faces. They'll say, "Look, we are sending our weapons, our intelligence to Iran to fight you guys, and that's the consequence of you guys attacking us. So deal with it. And if you carry on escalating things with us, then we will take things further, and we will take, some more serious actions if this continues." So I think that's what will happen, guys. Um, However, there are possible peace negotiations happening next few days. So who knows? They might come to a deal, they might not, but it doesn't look like they will. I mean, Trump has got a big mouth. Every time they come close to a deal, Trump changes his mind. He wakes up one morning, he agrees to a deal. Next morning he wakes up and he completely backtrack on the deal and adds all these new restrictions and rules and regulations and all these ridiculous demands again, and start sending out these tweets. You cannot trust this guy. You cannot do any deals with this guy. You're better off just ignoring him and just carry on fighting until Americans are tired of fighting in the Middle East, and they will leave. They will just leave. They will just surrender. They're not going to hang around and keep wasting lives and money in the region. They will just leave. That's what Iran needs to do. So let's talk about the next story, guys. China also sent a warning to Indonesia, and I don't know what the hell Indonesia is doing, guys, because first, you got Philippines adding all these military bases all over the country, which is, totally, those military bases are against China. They're not there for any other use. Philippines had disaster a few years ago. Where were the American troops? Did they help Philippines? No. Those bases are all there for a future war with China. Why is this important? So basically, it's important because this means that in any future war with China, they can fly over Indonesia to attack China and Chinese interests in the South China Sea and any other Chinese targets, basically. And they can fly from Australia because America has major bases in Australia, one huge nuclear base as well. And you've seen from the Iran war, basically what they will do is have these tankers, flying tankers, and they will basically fly their, B-52 bombers, F-35 jets, and these F-35s would do a refuel in the air using these jet tankers, and they will fly over Indonesia, and they will start, bombing China using their cruise missiles, Tomahawk and other cruise missiles, and they will fire them from a distance. And this is why it's very, very dangerous and very important for them to use Indonesian airspace. If you look at the map, you can't see Australia. Australia is directly below Indonesia. So if they cannot use Indonesian airspace, they have to fly around and flying around basically adds 2 or 3 times as much distance, basically. So flying over Indonesia gives them a shortcut. So this is why flying over Indonesia is very, very important. And I don't know why these ridiculous Indonesian leaders has allowed this. I mean, how stupid. I mean, I knew there was something wrong with this Indonesian leader because he recently joined Trump's Palestinian peace process or something like that. Then he obviously, I think he recently exited. But the fact is, he seems to be very much a puppet of the West. The last guy was much better. I can't remember his name, but the last guy seems to be much better. He's the one that put, Chinese high-speed rail into Indonesia, and but this new guy seems to be a very much an American stooge, a Western puppet, just like the Bong Bong Marcos in Philippines. And you can see how easy it is to lose your sovereignty in this day and age. In this day and age, you are one election away from losing your sovereignty as a country. Look what's happened to um, Argentina, for example. Argentina, had pretty much a good government. They had a plan. They were about to join the BRICS. They were very much in the Chinese camp, and they were very much in the camp for multipolar world. And I thought they were doing quite well as a country. They had a plan. They were going to get out of the economic um, issues that they've had, and then suddenly they managed to get this guy, this clown, Millie, in somehow, and he has absolutely destroyed the Argentina as a country. I've seen images on Twitter where people are eating garbage. The inflation has gone up by 57%. People are eating garbage from the streets. Poverty's increased, and all because this new guy is selling off all of Argentina's resources to the West. He's giving up all the Argentina's resources. He's even given up the Malvinas Islands as well. He's pretty much given that to the British. There's no talk of him, claiming that back. While the previous Argentinian government were very, very adamant they wanted the Malvina, islands back, and China said they would help. But this new guy seems to have sold everything to the West. Absolute sellout. And that's the problem. You're basically one government away from doing a 180. Even in the Philippines, you had the last guy who was actually quite good. Um, Now he's been put into prison, and you have this new pro-Western guy, Marcos, doing a complete 180 and going completely pro-West. And it looks like the same thing's happening to Indonesia, and the same thing happens all over the world, pretty much. Countries are not sovereign, guys. They make you believe that democracy, they give you a choice. You don't have a choice. You basically, your choice is to basically pick a puppet of the West. That's what they do. That's why they push democracy around the world, so they can control these countries. They can put a puppet in, and this puppet will basically agree to all of their demands. That's why they push democracy. So if there's a leader they don't like, they get rid of him, and they put all this money into the next leader. They say to him, okay, look, we're going to give you 10 million pounds or dollars for your campaign for you to win, and we will get you the votes. We will help you market. We will help you win. But if you do win, this is what you need to do to us. You will give us this. You will give us this. You will give these military bases. You will give us your airspace. And then the candidate, obviously, with the money, is like, yeah, give me the money, and yeah, I agree to all your demands. And then the guy gets elected, and guess what? He becomes a pro-Western puppet. Same things happened to Hungary. You've seen the new guy in Hungary. He's got rid of, Orban has been replaced. and the new guy, he has said that he's going to support Europeans giving loan to 90 billion loan to Ukraine. Orban was against it, but this new guy said he's going to support it. So you see how easy it is to get a new leader in and basically push your agenda. So I don't know what the hell Indonesia is doing, guys. I mean, like I said, there's only four countries that are truly sovereign. North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran, and they seem to be the only countries who are fighting these crazy puppets and these crazy people who are pretty much trying to destroy the world, and everyone else are just puppets going along with it. Okay, let's move on to the next story. So I kind of spoke a bit about this, but there seems to be some discussions whether JD Vance is going to go to Pakistan to have discussions with the Iranians. And the Iranians have said they're not going to turn up, but I believe they will turn up. Um, and I just don't have much hope, guys, in the day, because at the end of the day, whatever gets discussed in the meeting, like I said earlier, President Trump will just send a tweet saying something completely ridiculous and completely destroy the agreements that's been made. I mean, after the last talks, President Trump was sending out tweets saying Iran's agreed to give up all its uranium, which they never agreed to. He said Iran's opened the strait. He said Iran's agreed not to give money to Hezbollah or Hamas or Yemen. All these crazy demands Iran would never agree to. Suddenly Trump is, tweeting them out saying they did. Then Trump goes, he's going to block the Hormuz Strait himself. He's going to have a he's going to block Iranian ships coming in and out. So all this crazy stuff, basically, he's just destroying all the peace talks. And obviously stuff happening with Lebanon as well. So let's move on to Lebanon, because something really crazy has happened there over the past few days. So there's this picture that went viral of this IDF soldier destroying a statue of Jesus. And the Christian community in X and all over the world are absolutely shocked. They are saying, why are these IDF soldiers destroying Jesus? It's how brainwashed these Christian Zionists are, by the way. So let me tell you something. Finally, guys, I wanted to talk about this, but unfortunately, YouTube is not letting me upload the video every time I mention the J's and and every time I mention Jesus as well. They're just not letting me upload this. Obviously, you know why. The J's obviously control everything that goes on in YouTube, and any controversial subjects they don't allow anyone to talk about, especially if there's an outrage. But here it is, guys. You can see every time I try and upload it, it says checks are still running, and these checks have been going on for over 8 hours now. So you can see the video length is 45 minutes. It's quite long. So I'm probably not going to talk about it, to be honest. I'll just let it go. And but you guys know what I'm going to say anyway, and I'll leave you as that. Anyway, guys, take care for now, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.